Hey folks, it's Sam, and as you can see, I'm here with Dr. Malini Iyer. Thank you for joining me again today, Dr. Malini, and we're going to be talking about Rahu Ketu, the lunar nodes, through Synastry, which is when you lay one chart on top of another chart. When the lunar nodes contact points between two people, it really shows a lot of karmic power, and of course, we've heard that a lot. Oh, is it karmic? Everything is karmic, but when you see the nodes line up and hit a person's planet or in their, for example, their first and seventh house axis, it can show relationships. Even Malini and I have a lot of Rahu Ketu connections, but they're in the fifth house and the ninth house, which is about student and teacher and things like that. So again, in this notes course that we're doing over the weekend, you're going to be learning how these things affect all types of relationships as well, not just romantic ones. So Malini, great to have you here. And what do you have to say about that? Oh, by the way, Malini taught a whole course on this at the Parashar conference last year. So she's done a lot of research on this nodal contact points through Synastry.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me here. And like, you and I have prominent nodes. So every time we get into relationship with others, whether it is partnerships or even like working relationships, the nodes get hit one way or the other. And one of my passions about doing astrology is relationship astrology, because I have prominent nodes in the 1-7 axis, bringing relationships.
Well, you're Libra, so you're Libra, so you got.
I'm Libra. I'm Libra, so that was one of my passions, and one of the things that is not talked about a lot is nodes in relationships. And I was very impressed when you taught the relationship class in our level 1 certification, and the way you presented it, the 3D relationship model, wherein there is the first dimension is focus on self and what the person brings to the table. Then the second dimension is the synastry, wherein you overlay the two charts together, which is what we are going to be talking about, and then look at what buttons get pushed. And then the third dimension is looking at the moon, qualifying the moon through the nakshatras and seeing how the two different moons are compatible. Of course, we look at the moon because first karmas enter the mind. Moon represents our mind, but also moon is how we connect to people, right? It's the feeling connection state that we are in with the other people. But synastry, when you lay the two charts on top of each other, actually shows how the two people are going to trigger or push each other. And I was very interested in the nodes because it's easier to understand the masculine feminine qualities of other planets. And the masculine planets, for those who don't know, are Sun, Jupiter, Mars. The feminine planets are Venus and Moon. And then we have the neutral planets, the gender neutral planets, which are Saturn and Mercury. The nodes by themselves don't have gender, but every time they hit something or they're joined a planet, either in conjunction or through synastry, they tend to distort, magnify, or confuse the gender, right? The masculine or the feminine gender of the planet. And then that starts to play out in a relationship. Because in a relationship, what we are experiencing the most, and Sam talks about it a lot, is we are experiencing our own gender, the strengths of our gender, the weaknesses, and how we express it with the other sex, right? So that gets pushed too. And that's one of the main reasons I started to look into the nodes through synastry. And we have some case studies that we're going to look at.
Yeah. And so, what Malini's saying here, we have a case study here of Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder. It's pretty classic as far as just, you see in the bottom chart here, Winona Ryder, her Ketu falls if you lay the two charts on top of each other. And by the way, this is one of the main reasons why I recommend people use South Indian chart as well, because if it's North Indian chart, it's a house chart, not a sign chart. So you lay the signs on each other because the signs are the zodiac. Okay, just an aside. But this, you see where her Ketu is 17 degrees of Cancer is right on Johnny Depp's 1905 Ascendant. And her Rahu even is in his 7th house. So there are important points in our charts that show the relationships. Of course, Venus is important. Any planet joined another person's Venus is going to activate something in them about our relationships, compromise, wanting to experience pleasure. 7th house also, because that's where we look for the other person. 1st house, of course, is our identity. And because the nodes are an axis, they're always in opposition. If her Ketu is in his 1st house, then her Rahu is in his 7th house, just by the nature of the nodes. So you can see where she shows up, and it's this sort of Ketu Rahu thing that gets activated in Johnny Depp, because her nodes, which is this, again, when you talk about the nodes, it's this sort of confusing but exciting, energizing, invigorating thing, is right in his 1st house, which is literally like your presence. Like you're seeing my 1st house and Malini's 1st house here. You're seeing a Gemini with a lot of planets in Gemini and a Libra, right? You're seeing it because you see and experience the other person's 1st house in real time. Like that's how their body is resonating and whatnot. So this is a very powerful connection through Synastry, because her Ketu is right on his Ascendant. So something otherworldly, seems like from the past lives, because this is what Ketu is just like plopped down in his life. And it's like something about this feels like I've been with this person forever or something. This is what Ketu can tend to feel like. Now that's when it's on any planet, even if it's like on Venus or any planet in a person's chart. But again, when you start to have this, when you start to see these things pile up, then you start to get this understanding. And so we're going to delve into the nodes through Synastry in a very specific way in the upcoming course. Malini, you take it from here, because you know their relationship and you have a lot to offer here as well.
Yeah, definitely. When Rahu, Ketu are in the 1st 7 axis. So 1st is the self, right? It's you, yourself, your body. And 7th house is directly opposite the 1st house. So it's your intimate relationships. It could also be like business partnerships and stuff. And Winona Ryder's chart, she has the Ketu right over Johnny Depp's Ascendant, like Sam said. And her Rahu is right over his Saturn in the 7th house. So his 1st 7 axis is completely lighted up. Ketu, like Sam said, definitely it's that part of us that feels like we have known this forever. It's like, it feels like, and it's all an illusion, because both are smoky planets, right? Ketu and Rahu both are smoky planets, and they create an illusion which creates a strong hook so that you can come together and work on those things that get pressed. So that Ketu hitting his Ascendant is he feels like he has known her forever. And that's what he has a tattoo about. He has a tattoo that says Winona forever, because he felt like he knew her forever. And then Saturn actually is also really important through Synastry. In fact, long-term relationships, and Sam talks about it a lot, long-term relationships have some kind of Saturn connections. And why Saturn? Because Saturn is our power to commit, right? And it's long-term commitments. It's not short-term dating. So any long-term relationships will have Saturn connections. And her Rahu,
because we're willing to work hard to keep it going and not just give up once it gets hard.
Yes. And in this case, her Rahu hitting that Saturn, first of all, it feels like a lot of pressure for both of them. Like his Saturn is over her Rahu, so both of them are feeling the pressure of the relationship. And mostly the pressure came from the public, right? They were always in the public eye, they were in the media, and that relationship got a lot of media attention. So they felt like they were performing all the time. It took a toll on both of them. But he also, like, for Saturn to commit, Rahu is something so eccentric that Saturn part of us does not want to commit. There is that fear that if I commit to this, my life will always be so eccentric. Again, these are all the smoke and illusions we are working through. And that kind of wore that relationship down. If you read through how that relationship evolved, wherein they felt like they had known each other forever, but there was a lot of media attention and pressure, and they always felt like they had to perform, and they were out in the public eye rather than, they were also very deeply connected. Like the first time he saw her, he just wanted her, and he like walked across the room and like they danced the whole night together or whatever, something like that. But that Rahu, that tendency, the Saturn is wanting to commit, and that Rahu is like, I can't trust this to commit because it's just so.
Yeah, because Rahu is accelerate. Like Ketu is that power of the past, where again the thing that feels familiar, and Rahu is the uncertain future. But this is extending me in ways that I can't understand, and that feels out of control. And again, in the weekend course, we're also going to talk about why we see this too, because Rahu is not just the seventh. I'm sorry, for Johnny Depp, Saturn is not just the seventh house ruler, it's also the eighth house ruler. So this shows the natural tendency of Cancer to already be a little bit, nervous and afraid and feel very vulnerable in relationships, because Saturn rules the seventh house and the eighth house. And Rahu is right there going, but be careful. I'm uncertain. You never know what I'm going to do. And Winona Ryder, apparently, because she got into some things later on with shoplifting and other kinds of things. Again, we don't know all the whole story, but she's also got Moon Mars. You have to look at the whole thing to see. You could get a psychological profile about what it was that freaked him out, even though they had this thing. By the way, the other thing to really look at here with Johnny Depp is that it's not just that Ketu on his ascendant felt like he knew her forever, because that could be, it's an uncomfortable feeling at times, because it's like Ketu can feel, intense and severe, but it's something that he's very used to, because when you look at his chart, he's got Ketu moon. So Ketu in his chart, this is why you start in the 3D model with the person's chart. He's a Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, and Ketu is right on his moon. So it's not as though he's unfamiliar or that uncomfortable with that Ketu energy. In fact, it's right on his moon. So again, this is kind of a deeper layer once you start to peel it back, which is what we do in these courses, because someone might say, oh, so Ketu in someone's ascendant is good, right? Well, not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily feel that good. It really depends. In his case, even though Ketu can be hard to understand, it's familiar to him. And this is one of the strong points of astrology that I've been making for years. And it's a principle that filters down into sati and all kinds of other things that are supposed to be so scary. Something that feels familiar. Like if someone has Saturn join the moon or Saturn near their moon in their natal chart, then something like sati or Saturn's influence isn't as scary to them, because it's familiar. They're used to it. It still might be hard, but they're used to that energy. So it's not to say that every time Ketu is in someone's ascendant, it's going to be good and it's going to mean they're going to have a relationship. It might not, because it might just freak the person out and be the reason why they're like, I don't know, something about this feels really weird, because it also feels very critical. And Ketu, it can feel like exposing the flaws in the person's identity. That's actually the thing. But because he's got it himself, he's used to doing that. And again, so the thing about the nodes is that it can bring these kind of confusing attractions and attachments, but they feel kind of faded in this context where we're finishing karma with Ketu, starting new karma with Rahu. Again, these are the things that we're going to really unpack, because that's also the difference between Ketu and Rahu. Ketu is finishing karma, Rahu is starting new karma. So in many ways, they got together so he could finish a certain amount of karma. And it actually feels like that when you're with those Ketu connections. It feels familiar, but it also feels like something we've done. Yeah. And maybe we're finishing. And maybe they came together with that kind of faded attraction to have this thing and then finish that cycle of karma. For him, it felt like maybe I'm just finishing this cycle of karma. And the new cycle, which was represented by that Rahu Saturn, is like, and I'm not really sure what all of this is. So in his mind, it's like, okay, I feel like I've finished this. And what the future holds for it seems kind of unpredictable and weird. And because I'm a Cancer and Saturn also rules the 8th house, I'm not sure what to do here.
Yeah. And that has been his history. If you look at his recent severely publicized divorce case, right? So yeah, that's bang on, Sam.
So these are the things that we're going to be talking about in the course, and you can see it is 2 Saturdays from February 18th and February 25th, and it's 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific. And again, we wanted to just show you this because this is going to be part of it, and it's one of the parts that's most important and valuable because you see a lot of these nodal connections, not just in romantic relationships. Like I said, even with Malini and myself, we have a lot of this synastry through other nodes. Me through her ninth house, because I have Rahu. I have all these planets in the ninth house, in her ninth house, where I have Rahu, and she has Sun, Mercury, and Mars. Right, all three.
Yeah. I have Sun, Mercury, Mars. Yeah.
So Malini has Sun, Mercury, Mars in Gemini, and I have Rahu there. So again, Rahu expands things, and it's her ninth house. So this is why you could see that of all the people that I've interacted with and taught, like Malini is one of the main ones, if not the main, or certainly one of the main students that has really taken and been like, oh, these are the teachings that really make sense. And it's also the same. I have the moon in Libra where she has Ketu, right? So again, there's also that kind of familiarity, like, okay, and it's my fifth house. So one could say, like, with past lives or whatever, that maybe past lives, maybe I was her father, or she was my daughter, some people could say this, and we have that kind of relationship, that kind of friendship, right? Where there's a very easy kind of exchange, and I don't think we've ever even had an argument about anything, in relation to all the things that have happened. So these nodes come and affect all relationships where you see these connections. It's going to be there. And again, in this context, like with Malini and I, it's a very auspicious one because these are trinal houses. The fifth house and the ninth house are the two most auspicious houses in the chart, really. Many times the first house is a little too much to bear at times, but the fifth house is like, and they're powerful planets because again, Malini also has an exalted Saturn there. I also have like Mercury and Venus up there in the same houses. So it's not like a lot of, sort of difficult energy. So again, these contact points through synastry and the nodes are really important in this context as well, in all relationships. Malini, what would you like to say?
That is absolutely correct, Sam. And we have always joked about you being a father figure to me. And also, actually, my father had a lot of planets in Gemini. That was his fifth house. He was in Aquarius rising. So we had that connection, right? And and he had his Ketu there. He had his Ketu in Gemini. So there was that connection. You have your Rahu there. So that nodal connection that draws you in. I almost call it magnetism, which is a good word and also a bad word because it does not really explain much. But there's this magnetism wherein there's an easy flow of energy and you want to be around these people and absorb and learn. That fifth, ninth house connection, absorbing and learning and trusting your teachings. I think that even though, for some people, like a lot of people from my culture, even though they are familiar with astrology, they can't trust astrologers, right? They can't trust the teachings so easily. And there's an easy trust that is built. So yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah, but that quality of magnetism is also a big part of the nodes, and especially when they're very prominent, a person will have that. But sometimes it's a neutral term. Magnetism isn't always good. We got to take judgments out of things. And again, when you study with me and learn the way I teach, and we get the judgment out of it, because magnetism, oh, it's good, or this, oh, it's good. Get out of the good and bad. That part of it requires discrimination, and it's always variations. Nothing is all good or all bad. Magnetism can be good. It can also be, quote, bad. It's a spectrum. So this, and the nodes themselves are that quality where they get your attention. Mm-hmm. Rahu is very noticeable with attention, but Ketu also, especially when you get that kind of synastry point. Ketu is like a laser. And if someone gets a Ketu synastry point, it's not going to get everybody's attention like a Rahu person might, because Rahu is much more flagrant and external. But wherever Ketu is, it's like a laser. And so if that laser part of someone's chart hits another person's chart, they're going to really feel it. It's going to be like, "Yuh." And so again, that's very magnetic, but it's also like, stop looking at me. It could be very tricky.
Yeah. I think the first time I heard about Sam was through a YouTube video I was watching. And in the very first 30 seconds, even before Sam's introduction was over, I paused the video, I went on his website and I signed up for his course. So it was like a 2 hour long video. In the first 30 seconds, I was like, yeah, this is it. And so yeah, it gives that connection, that
Something.
that moment. Yeah.
So
I know this is good. Yeah. That's the
So
kind of thing.
So Malini, I really appreciate you showing up for this and taking the time to do this again. And we both look forward to seeing you. She's going to be co-teaching with me this weekend, where we're going to be talking about Rahu and Ketu in ways you've heard and a lot of ways you haven't, and particularly making them more neutral, less scary, something very approachable, something where you can really ride the power of those nodes to, again, transforming the darkness into the light and befriending those shadowy parts of yourself and probably things you've heard about your whole life about how they're scary and malefic and difficult. They're confusing, but there's a lot of wisdom that comes, and some of the greatest, territory that your soul has covered in this lifetime comes from the nodes, and a lot of the embedded and deeper genius that you have that's overlooked is also shown. So again, thank you, Malini, for doing this again, and we look forward to seeing you all next weekend. As I'm recording this on February 12th, that'll be February 18th. So you all take care. Thank you, Malini.
Thank you. Take care. See you soon.
On this weekend course, you'll learn the healing myth related to the Samudra Manthan, or the churning of the milk ocean, toxicity or purification, transforming toxicity and poison into nectar with the lunar nodes, blindness and ignorance, the crippling false choice created by the nodes. It's like an everyday psychosis that just seems normal to you. Fated connections like your parents, your lovers, most of the deep entanglements of your life, sex, drugs, and power, many of the unconscious power plays, charisma, hallucinogenic qualities of other people are seen by the nodes. It's also the Kundalini, the goddess awakening. The nodes are the Kundalini, but exactly how does that work? Also tracking the serpent as it bites and heals. You'll always need to know where the nodal axis is relative to your chart. So there's so much more.